powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, this is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and it is brought to you today, of course, by our friends at Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast, which you can listen to on all podcasting platforms, and check out their YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. Eagles lose 33-13 last night, and Geoff Mosher is here to break it all down. The offensive mistakes, the defense not being able to get some stops, and obviously it's second straight loss, Mosher, where it was not an aesthetically pleasing loss. They got beat up on both sides of the ball. So let's start with the turnovers in the game last night, and obviously they play a huge factor in the game. But is it as simple as, hey, you don't have turnovers like you get turnovers from guys that you're counting on that generally don't fumble the ball? Smith and Brown. Hurts has had some fumbling problems, so I don't know that you can include him there. But is it as simple as, hey, this offense was fine if they don't turn the ball over, or do you see bigger problems from the offense?
It's a great question. I do think that the turnovers are the reason that they're not in that game. Obviously have a chance to win that game if they don't turn the ball over, because they moved the ball well. They had 324 yards of offense, and that's, without completing 2 of their possessions. They averaged 6.2 yards per play. So I do think that the way they were moving the ball at times, the turnovers were just killer and gave them no chance to be in that game when they very well should have and could have been in that game and could have won it had they not turned the ball over. But that's also, there are some alarming things with the offense, specifically the run game. They ran the ball well, but they did not have any explosive runs for the second straight week. I think their longest run was 9 yards. Last week, the longest run was 7 yards. They had a 35-yarder against Kansas City 3 weeks ago, or Buffalo, and a 36-yarder against Kansas City. But for the most part, you have not seen an explosive element to this run game, which has always been kind of a big part of what they do when they're doing it at their best. And I also would say that I think third down, there were some struggles in the passing game for them because they are not creative, in my mind, and talking to some other people about this as well, with their passing game as much. They run plays that have worked for them earlier this year, last year, but, the tape develops on you. Teams get to know what you do. I don't think they've done a good enough job trying to switch some things up, run some different plays out of the same formation, try to scheme guys open. I think they're just relying on A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert to win, and they can win a lot, but on those third downs, the money downs, is when you're starting to see defenses do a better job against them.
Moshe, you talked about this on the Inside the Birds postgame. The Eagles averaged 6.2 yards a play. The Cowboys only averaged 5.3 yards a play. So, all this talk today about the offense is too predictable. They don't have enough motion. They're not running the ball enough. Are they accurate claims?
Well, a little bit. Again, the Eagles moved the ball well, and it's not that the Cowboys didn't. The Cowboys ran 22 more plays than the Eagles. So I guarantee if the flow of the game was different and the Eagles ran 22 more plays, probably going to run the ball a little bit more with a lead, and it's going to be lower than 6.2 as well. But the point is that this is the second straight week. And the point is all year, it's felt like the offense has battled some throws of inconsistency where they've been dynamic at times, then not dynamic at times. They've had quarters where go back to the first Dallas game. They had 28 points, right, through the first 3 quarters. And it looked like they were moving the ball well. And all of a sudden, the fourth quarter, they couldn't do anything with the football, and Dallas started to come back, and that game was winnable for Dallas. So they've just not had the same level of consistency, and I do think that they have to go back to the drawing board a little bit, specifically with their run game and then their third down passing. I think they've got to be able to get a little bit more creative with route concepts as teams are starting to sit on certain things that they're doing. I thought Cowboys corners had a pretty good idea of what routes the Eagles wide receivers were running because they were tight. And even last week against the Niners don't have a great secondary, But whether they were playing zone or man, I thought their coverage was pretty sticky. And it was the first time I said, gee, I was like, I'm used to seeing Smith and A.J. Brown just beat their guy. Man, it looks like that's not happening now. They're not getting open as easily as usual. And if that's the case, to me, it's not talent. It's not like these guys suddenly can't get open. It's that the opponents are getting a better idea of what they want to do offensively, and that's when it's up to the coaching staff to now counter and say, okay, do we need more crossing routes? Do we need more scissors routes? Do we need more other kind of routes that other opponents haven't seen and can't sit on?
Moshe, last week I asked you what's of bigger concern, the running offense or the run defense? So let me just copy and paste. I'll ask you that same question again.
Yeah. What was my answer, by the way?
I don't remember. I want to say you said the offense, but I mean you can pick a card, any card, obviously.
Yeah, no, it's a good question though, because I would still say run offense, because I really do believe that as a whole the defense is not going to get much better than it already is. This is your Eagles defense, and when the Eagles win games for the most part this year, it's because they've outscored the opponent. There have been a few good defensive games. You go back to Tampa Bay, played good defense there. They had a nice defensive game against Miami as well. But, you look up and down the schedule, you see 38-31 over Washington, 34-31, 34-28 over Minnesota, so 37-34 over Buffalo. I think the offense has to carry the defense here on out. So, but that's not to say that all of a sudden here you're starting to see the Eagles get run on. And I did mention this to you last week when you asked me that. I was surprised by how Kansas City was able to attack them with Pacheco on the edges. I was surprised at how Buffalo was able to run the ball. I think they had over 180 or 190 rushing yards, even though a lot of that was Josh Allen. They did run the ball effectively with Cook. And it even surprised me more that Dallas, which has been throwing the ball on everybody lately, they came out and tried to establish a run game with Pollard and Dowdle, and were able to do that and set up makeable third downs for them. That was an interesting tactic by Dallas. They must have seen something. I think Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter have played well for most of the year, but they are young players, and the snap count is starting to go up and up and up on them, and they didn't play that whole lot like that at Georgia. So I would say it's starting to become a little bit of a concern the last 4 weeks, how they've been run on from Kansas City to Buffalo to San Francisco to Dallas.
All right, so make this make sense for me, Moshe, right? We're talking about the offense and the struggles. This team is not even looking to establish a running game, and I know how the game is playing out. It dictates how you're going to, call each play on each series. I understand that, but you run a run-pass option heavy offense, and you're not establishing any type of run game. I feel like that just puts so much pressure on Jalen Hurts to either establish the run himself or make these Herculean type of plays in the passing attack, because defenses see this offense as so very predictable. It's just like, talk about that. Make that make sense for myself and the listeners.
It's a tough one for me. I'm not a whole big you got to run guy. I do think this team, Ryan, I agree with you. I think this team needs to run the ball. I'm going to go back to this. I just think they need to run the ball better, because they want to throw, and having more explosive runs will make those defenses respected again. If you have defensive play, right, and the linebackers and safeties are all dropping back because they're just waiting for you to throw the ball, or they're saying, hey, go ahead and run the ball, our front six can keep you to 3 or 4, like the Niners did, right, then that's concerning, because the Eagles are supposed to be able to carve those kind of defenses up, and they just haven't been doing that lately. So it's not, to me, the volume of runs, it's the impact of the runs when they do run, because I think if they had a few more of those 10, 12, 15, the occasional 20 and 30-yard run, when they do that, you see the coaches get excited, right? The whole offense, and then that's what makes them want to run the ball more and really break the back of a team, and then they start to open it up a little bit, and it gives them all sorts of optionality. Right now, they're just sort of steady Eddie in the run game, and that's making the coaches feel like we got to throw the ball if we want to, carry this defense and outscore the other team.
Geoff Mosher from Inside the Birds podcast is with us, looking back at the game. Now, they look against Minnesota, Tampa Bay, who are on the great teams, both playoff teams currently right now, they ran the ball 80-plus times in the 2 weeks and just looked like a college offense in running the football. So they have the ability to run the ball or they don't have the ability to run the ball. Do you look at those two games and say, they're an outlier, that's not really who they can be? Or do you look at those games and wonder, why aren't they that team?
Well, a little bit of both. I do think early in the year, and I remember that Minnesota game, I watched that tape like a hawk, like twice, because I was amazed by some of the things that Brian Flores was doing defensively. It seemed like they were so afraid of the explosive play. They didn't respect the run. And so it was an open invitation for the Eagles to just run the ball against light front. And then when they did, those teams back then, earlier in the year, were still playing. You could watch the linebackers. They were still worried about the threat of Jalen Hurts running. So you have a linebacker who's sort of not committing fully to an A gap because he's sort of still trying to defend the B and the C gap. And that one step makes a difference when DeAndre Swift is blowing through the hole right there. They are not scared right now of Jalen Hurts keeping the ball. I mean, do they play the potential of his own read? Sure. It's not like they don't do it at all. But they're playing the run way more aggressively because they know Jalen's most likely not going to keep the ball outside the edges. If anything, they're inviting him to run up the middle, and then, bam, they lay a hit on him, and then you see them fumble, right? So that, I think, is a big part of it, Mike, of why they ran the ball so early on, because defenses are still scared of that Jalen Hurts run element, and you just haven't seen defenses be scared of that.
Yeah.
Lately.
Moshe, you hit it on a little bit with Rye on their defense, but that was talking about the run defense and the front four a little bit. Do they got big problems in their secondary?
Yes, they have big problems in the secondary. I think you're starting to – maybe we talked about this last week, but I think you're starting to see the impact of not having Denard Wilson on the team. I was speaking to someone today involved in the league, not with the Eagles, but watches the Eagles tape. And, the without getting too wonky about it, when the Eagles play man defenses, you're wondering why, they're playing certain, techniques and doing certain things in the back end that sort of help the opposition out or don't do the best to help the back end of the defense out. So you look at the Denard Wilson, who did a good job. I mean, the Eagles' defensive backs for the last 2 years have played really well, whether it was at corner. James Bradbury had a great year last year. Slay was good. Marcus Epps really developed. C.J. Gardner-Johnson comes in here and, learns the defense on the fly pretty well. They got good secondary play. They're just not getting that now. And if it's the same things over and over that you see, I think you have to wonder about the coaching there.
Yeah, and I think we're all scratching our heads a little bit regarding the coaching. But we've talked about the offense. How much do you think the offensive struggles have spilled over to the defense, meaning because the offense has just been sputtering so consistently that the defense now is just getting strained and putting more pressure on them when they're taking the field and they're like, man, every possession here, we need to get a stop. The offense is not giving us any type of a break.
Yeah, I almost sort of see it in reverse, that the defense has been so, weak that the offense has felt like it has to carry the team, and maybe guys are pressing. But to your point on the defensive part, right, the pass route, we haven't – the Eagle – I can't believe that I've been saying this stat lately, but the Eagles have the fewest sacks on third down in the NFL. I mean, if that's not the most amazing thing. Now, it can't just be that Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat and Fletcher Cox no longer can play the game. I mean, it just can't be that, right? Like, it's got to be that quarterbacks are just so confident throwing against the back end, know what they want to do with the ball. Occasionally you do see Dallas did it, San Francisco did it. They'll keep a tight end. They'll keep a running back in. They do still respect the front four of the Eagles, so they'll dedicate an extra guy. Most teams want to have 5 outlets, right? They want to be able to have 3 receivers, a running back, and a tight end usually to be able to throw the ball to. Lately, you're seeing teams willing to say, I'll keep one of those outlets in to give myself extra protection against the 4-man rush, to essentially create 6 versus 4, and then I will throw against that defense, that back end, with just 4 outlets instead of 5 and figure out where to throw it to because I'm that confident they'll be open. So I think that's the part of the defense that is collapsing. The pass rush is becoming a victim to the back end's lack of ability to stop anybody.
There's all these issues we're talking about. We're asking you bigger concern, pick a card, run offense, run defense, pass rush, everything that we've all seen under a magnifying glass, if you will. But if you're Nick Sirianni this week, Geoff Mosher, and you're putting the first thing on the whiteboard as far as this is what we need to work on this week, this has to change, this has to improve, like, what is it? What do you start with?
Well, the first thing I'm thinking of is I'm looking around at some of the quotes from my team about this loss, and I'm seeing A.J. Brown says that turnovers are the least of our problems. And I may have to have a talk with A.J. Brown because I don't know what games A.J. Brown's been watching the Eagles play that he's been involved with, but turnovers are – they have like – what did they get, the 18th turnover last night with the 3? I think they had 15 going in or 12 going in and they got 15. Turnovers are a huge issue for this offense. He had one of them. Jalen had one of them. Devontae Smith had one of them, like you guys said, guys that you ordinarily don't expect. But this team has to outscore the opponent. So you need all your possessions and you need to score on your possessions. You can't be giving them away. So to me, that's sort of the first thing I'm working on. Let's remember, as negative as we all sound right now, the Eagles lost 2 games by double digits. Not much has changed because they've been turning the ball over a lot this year. They've been playing bad defense a lot this year on the back end. The only thing that changed is the level of competition that they're playing. They played the best team in football, in my opinion, 49ers, and they played a Dallas team that finally looks balanced and right and is getting good play from quarterback, getting good coaching, and they're a legit contender in the NFC. They're going to go back after this Seattle game, right, and play the Cardinals. They're going to play the Giants twice. And they're probably going to win those games. I don't know. Maybe they'll get into a tailspin. But the point I'm saying is, like, all this stuff they've been doing all year long, they've been getting away with because usually they don't turn the ball over 3 times in a game, and they're able to score a lot of points and win those games. So that's where I start. How do we make sure we're secure with the football?
All right, Geoff Mosher, you look at this Eagles team. They got beat up twice in a row, back-to-back weeks here. You mentioned, the question that Ryan asked about Nick Sirianni and what does he write on the whiteboard. But do you also look at Nick Sirianni and say he's part of the reason why this team has not been prepared enough and has gotten blown out the last 2 weeks?
Possibly. I don't know at this point. Is Nick Sirianni, at 10-3, did Nick Sirianni exceed expectations with a highly flawed team, or is he part of the problem? You'd almost have to know what's being said. I mean, I know he's not afraid to coach his players. That's a positive. I know he's not afraid to coach his coaches. That's a positive. I know, at least from what I see and how he deals with adversity, that he tends to keep the focus on, the standard is the standard, it is what it is. I'm very interested to see what happens over the next 2 or 3 weeks because it's all about the tone you set and the ability to flush it, move on, correct your mistakes. So right now I tend to think he's more a positive than a negative, but let me see how the next few weeks go. Let me see if leaders of the team start giving up on the play call. Let me see if guys start not playing very hard. Then maybe we'll see, all right, there might be an issue here.
All right, Geoff Mosher, a lot this week on Football at 4, obviously looking at this game, looking at the big picture, and then, of course, looking at the Seahawks hosting Philadelphia on Monday Night Football, a place that has not been very kind to the Eagles, has been the Pacific Northwest. Moshe, appreciate it as always, pal.
All right, guys, have a good one.